Mine says recording. Did you say recording? Okay, good, good, good. Welcome to the last Monday in December. And we are going to talk about outsourcing today.
Yeah,
Hi, Jill.
yeah. If you're sitting there right now, not taking any clients and enjoying, well, if you were in Britain, you might be enjoying some mince pies. If you're sitting there and enjoying your Christmas food and thinking, oh, all the things I have to go back to get the business started, then maybe it's time to start thinking about outsourcing some of those things.
Yes, I always like to think like this time of year, I always start to think about like, what am I going to do different next year? How am I going to change things? And I get really excited to have like a little bit of a slow January. I mean, I hate the state of my account January because it's always a little bit scary when clients are slower, but there's so much opportunity in January to start fresh and figure out like how things are going to be better this year and make some big goals for your new year. And so I think one of the big things that can push the needle is when you figure out what you really like to do, like all the things that need to be done in your business. And then of those things, what do you really like to do? What are you really good at? What are you just okay at? And then what are you terrible at? And what suffers because of it? And figuring out, like, obviously, I think all of us would love to be able to outsource all of these things and like have
Everything except the
perfect
photos.
business, right? Yeah, like you like have this perfect business where you're like, oh yeah, I have a guy for that. Oh yeah, I have somebody for that. And like I always think about like if somebody just like allowed me to start a business and like I didn't actually have to do anything but just be the mastermind behind it and I could just tell people what to do and actually have people that can do it well. I'd be so good at this, right?
You would
That's
be
not
good at being the
reality.
boss. Is that what we're
I'd
saying?
be really good. I actually don't know that I'd be good at being the boss. I think I'd just be really good at being the ideal person of like, this is going to be great. Somebody go figure it out.
Well, and this is the point that when you are a solo business owner, you wear a lot of hats. We were talking in the last Monday when we were talking about the different things you might buy. We're talking about CRMs that are client relationship managers, and it reminds me that one of them is called 17 Hats. And the
Yeah.
reason it's called that is because you're so used to wearing so many different hats in your business. But I think as well as being excited about looking forward for the year, like along with that, it's really good to like take a look back and be like, which hats were just like, did you not want to wear? Which hats were constantly falling off and causing a problem? Like, and which hats are your hats and you want to show them off? Because we can't all wear 17 hats all the time. Like at some point things are gonna fall apart as a result of that.
What is that? Is it P.D. Eastman that wrote that book about Go Dog Go? And it's like, do you like my hat? I do not like that hat.
I do not. I
I
do
do
not
not like
like the accounting and bookkeeping hat at all.
yes. Okay, so let's go dog go our businesses here and figure out which hats we do not like.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I think that like the big areas to consider are um business stuff, right? Like it business admin in terms of accounting, bookkeeping. Those ones come to mind immediately because most of us that are creatives, whether we're writers or photographers or any kind of artists really in that regard is generally of the I don't like numbers. I don't want
Tax
to fill in
forms.
spreadsheets. I don't want to do taxes. And we just don't want that to be a part of our lives.
I
So
joke with clients because I hate spreadsheets so much that I make tables in like Google Docs and Word Docs. And some people will be like, this looks like a spreadsheet, but you made it in a Google Doc as a table? And I'll be like, yes, because I
right,
don't do spreadsheets.
don't do spreadsheets. I hate all things bookkeeping. I used to try and do it myself. And this is another thing that I wanted to say about the whole trying to do it yourself and 17 hats thing is I think that as photographers, especially as we're getting started and not bringing in a ton of money, it's really, really difficult to justify hiring someone
Yes.
when you can do it yourself. You're like, I
Yeah.
know I can do this. So why I can't afford to hire someone. But I've gotten to the point now where I can't afford not to hire someone because, and I think that that is true earlier than you think it is.
Hmm.
So what's that book? It's called Who Not How. And the first time I read it, it was like a mind blowing, oh my God, I need to embody all the things that this guy is talking about because he's talking about how that's how you grow. Like
Mhm.
if in order to get bigger, make more money, do more things, and like have more time to do the things that you want, you have to find the right people to do the job for you. And so, like for me, one of the things that like I really like to do, but I'm not really very fast at is like graphic design. Like
Mhm.
I like it. I enjoy it. It's fun. But it's very, very time consuming for me because it's not my zone of genius, if you will, right? And I think for a lot of people that might be editing.
Yeah.
Whereas like editing for me is like that's not an area of my business that I will ever give up, even though I've had multiple business coaches tell me that I should for
Well,
time's
and we should
sake.
probably
But
explain the reason for that, which is that you started as editor, right?
I did. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my background is in editing even more so than in newborn photography. So I love newborns and I don't think I'll ever give up newborns, but Photoshop editing is my thing. Actually, I have a class for that. So if anybody is listening to this and they want to take my
She's very
editing,
good at it. No, but
you
like
can.
that's how you got into the business. So I know, for
Yeah.
example, a copywriter who used to be an accountant and then she became a copywriter. Now she probably still does her own accounts, right? Because she
Oh,
probably
sure.
enjoys it and she's probably good at it and
Exactly.
she probably never wants to give that part up. So don't
Yeah.
forget that everybody, like the reason we have zones of genius is that not everybody's is the same. There will be areas of things that you enjoy and even though it's maybe not cost effective, you still want to keep because they're parts of what you love. And honestly, we are forced into doing parts of it that we don't love so often that if there's a bit that you love, you should definitely keep it. Just keep it
Yeah.
if you enjoy it.
Yeah. So I think that I think labeling those tasks as like, this is something that I love and I don't want to give up. For me, that's editing. Graphic design falls into this gray zone for me where I really like it, but it takes me a lot of time. And is there somebody out there that I can hire to do this one-off project that like I just hired a graphic designer to take my old welcome guide and put it into Canva. And it was one of those things that I knew I could do it. I know how to upload it into Canva. I know how to like readjust
Play
things and put
around.
on my font and colors and change like I know how to do that. But I also knew that it was going to take me probably 40 hours, like realistically, to like actually sit and get it exactly how I wanted. And so I reached out to an outsourced graphic designer that I know and I said, "How long do you think this would take you?" And she said, "Probably 8 to 10 hours." And I was like, "Done, sold, perfect." And she charged me, I think it was $35 an hour, like so minimal compared to how much time it would have taken me that like, did I really want to spend $350 to do my welcome guide? Of course not. No, I don't.
But in this
But I
Thanksgiving,
also don't want
like,
to spend 40 hours
right.
redoing it. In which case, like, actually, what would have happened is it just wouldn't have
It
been
wouldn't
done.
have got done. Or you would have ended up doing it in the outsides of your time, not really in your working hours, but like when you've got family around, and you would have resented that you were time away from your family to do the
Yes.
thing. So, and I think
Exactly.
there's one other thing that you and I know this, and so we've forgotten to say it, but I think it might be important to mention for people who don't realize is to do all of this, you need to understand roughly how much money you make an hour, which means you really need to understand. And this is not in the ideal sense. This is not in the thing you would say to your friends to make out that you have a good business, but you're really not very sure if you do or not. Not what you say to your spouse. This is the truthful how many hours do you spend on your business and how much money do you bring in as a result. And
Yeah.
that's like you need to understand when you're editing for clients, every time you edit for clients, roughly how long are you spending? And if you go in and out over various days, you gotta add all that up over the time.
Yeah.
And the same for like one-off marketing things, maybe not doing them all the time, but like documenting how long are you spending on each project so that you have a real, like a proper sense. Like Paige, she loves doing the Canva stuff. She doesn't mind doing the graphic design, but 40 hours, if you start to say this would be 40 hours of my time, that's when you're like, whoa, that's just not, it's not worth it for me to do that.
Right. Well, and some people might be listening to me say that and go, why on earth would it take you 40 hours? I could do that in 4 because you're good at it and I'm
Because you
not.
could. Yeah, and that's the honesty that I'm talking about here is
Yeah.
don't say 4 if actually it was going to take 12. Like if you want it to take
Right.
4, that's one thing, but how long does it actually take you? Because if it actually takes you 12, that's what you need
Yeah.
to bear in mind.
It's a matter of being realistic with yourself, I think a lot of times of being honest with your own abilities and does it matter if this thing actually gets done? Because in my case, it just wouldn't have if it was
Mhm.
down to me. Does it matter how good it is?
Mhm.
Like, does quality really matter? Or is done better than perfect? And then, like, is it going to move the needle on my business? And so one of the areas that I wanted to talk about for outsourcing is social media, because I
Mhm.
think that that is something that is difficult for some people, is really easy for others. And it can go, like it can be a really frustrating thing depending on how many different platforms you're on. It can be a really big job. So earlier this year, I had this lady reach out offering to do my social media for me. And so I entertained the idea of it and had her out. We had a nice long meeting and everything that she talked about was great. Like, this is what I would provide for you. This is what I would do for your accounts. This is how much I would be in there. And she was offering basically like a full-time job sort of deal. But in order to do that, she wanted $2,500 a month. And for me, that's basically like one more newborn client, but each of my newborn clients takes me about 10 hours, like roughly. And so to spend $2,500 to bring in one more newborn client, it's like I couldn't justify that expense. That felt way too expensive for me. Now, that's not to say that you can't get somebody to do your social media for considerably
Mhm.
less. And like she
Or that
wanted
for
to do a
some
whole big,
people that decision might have been a yes. Like it's individual,
right.
but you
Yeah.
need to know all the parts that join in to
Yeah.
decide yes or no.
Exactly. And that is exactly my point is that like I had to sit down and really analyze like what is this outsourcing going to do for me? And I know that for me, I don't get very many clients from Instagram. Oh, excuse me. I think most of my clients actually come from Google or word of mouth referrals. And so I think Instagram is kind of like they looky-loo at my portfolio, they see what I do, they like my work, they go to my website, and then they dig a little deeper. And so it's not usually just Instagram. Generally, when I get inquiries on Instagram, they're pricing, related. They want to know what does a newborn session cost? And then when they hear back, I don't hear anything further. So most of the time that's not my ideal audience. And so for other people, that might very much be their ideal audience. You
Mhm.
might get all of your clients from Instagram, in which case $2,500 a month to hire somebody to do your social media might be a steal. You might be like, oh my God, yes, like absolutely. I don't think that's true for most people, but it could be that spending a couple $100s with somebody to do a couple posts a week is great and makes and moves the needle for you.
And that's
Or
also
yeah,
like knowing how many people do you
yeah,
bring
exactly.
in? So this is a whole load of things that you have to track about your business. How much is your average order? Do you know that? And maybe, and then sometimes part of having an understanding of what your average order is having a repeatable process you use with all your clients. So you can start to say, oh, it fluctuates what they buy, but if I take the last 10 clients I worked for, and add it all together and divide it by 10, it comes out at roughly X per client. And if you have a repeatable system, they're probably not going wildly different in the numbers of
Yeah.
what they're purchasing. So then you can start to say, okay, I get X clients a month on average off Instagram. I would need 3 extra clients a month to make this worthwhile. Then you can start to like objectively decide if something's the right decision rather than just sort of throwing a dart at the wall and hoping for the best.
Well, and I would also argue that like deciding to outsource doesn't mean that you have to do this thing forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have gone in waves where like for a while there I was outsourcing my blogs and I really wanted to see if I got more website traffic, if I had this consistency. And I really didn't. I mean, I think that I get better website organic traffic when I'm like blogging routinely, but not, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, it has to be every Monday and it has to be, about these things and it has to be these long, I don't find that I find this, I see this like really easy. If I don't blog at all, I get nothing. And then if I do, I get, it goes way
Mm-hmm.
up. It's not like that, but there are there are some perks to it, but not maybe not necessarily enough to warrant hiring a full-time copywriter like Jill here. Like I'm not gonna hire somebody like Jill's told me multiple times, like you don't want to hire me for your blogs.
You really don't.
Yeah.
But that is part of understanding. And I think maybe what we skipped over a bit here, I was just thinking about, is that maybe people don't realize that your social media and your blogs are part of marketing. And
Yes.
marketing is really just getting out. So referrals come in, that's someone telling someone about you. Now, you still want places they can learn about you. But when you're marketing, you're putting out into the world, I am a business, I am here, I would love if you hired me, here's what I do. And we do that through social media and Instagram, we do it through our blogs, and we do it through our website. And there may be other places you do it as well. You could maybe do it through paid ads. Like there's all these different ways that we market. It's a huge part of how we run our business potentially. And I think a lot of people don't understand about it. And I think it's really worth spending a little bit of time learning about what that is, just enough to know like where, if somebody learns about you cold, it's not a direct referral. How did they find out about you? Are you asking them? Are you tracking that? When someone comes in new, are you trying to find out how did you learn about me? Where did you find me on Google, or did you find me on Instagram, or what's going on? So like tracking all of that helps you understand where to put your money as well. Like where's the
Yeah.
areas that are worth spending money on?
And some of that's a guessing game because
Well,
sometimes you
yes.
just don't know. Like I actually have a meeting right after I get off this call with you that is with my Google Ads person because we're going to analyze all of our lead results. And part of the thing that we've been struggling with is how do we figure out if it came from a Google ad or not?
Mhm,
Like we've
mhm.
got these leads, how do we figure out where they came from? And it's tricky and complicated and can be hard when somebody goes to your Instagram and then they go to your website and then they call you. And so you're like, how did you find me? And they say Google. And you're like, oh, well, actually, she found me on Instagram first, but you
Yeah.
don't know that.
Yeah, and they
So
don't always
sometimes,
know to
but
mention it either because they don't think about that part. So,
no, but it is good. It is really good to remember to ask because it
yes,
does
yeah,
help a lot if you have at least a little bit of data of where those good leads came from and where your bad leads came from. Because maybe you
mhm.
get a lot of good leads from maybe you get a lot of leads from Instagram, but they're not good leads,
So I was
you
just going to
know?
say, you generally don't get good, like if someone directly contacts you on Instagram, they're not a good lead for you generally,
No,
right?
almost never.
And then one of the things that we sell, or that we're just about to sell, that goes with our workflows is a set of SMS messages that you can send. So Paige has it automated that if someone messages her on Instagram and they're really just asking about pricing, she has a process that sends them messages that she's not involved in. And you would only ever hear from that person again if they actually are a good fit and they want to learn more. But I'm guessing that most of the time that automated system just funnels all those bad leads away.
Yeah, I mean, I find that I just don't, most of the people just don't even bother following up because
Yeah.
they're just looking for a quick thing and they're not digging very deep. Like, I mean, if you take 2 seconds, you can find that's like a
Yeah.
pricing link on my Instagram bio or a link to the website or, anything about like how to book your newborn session. And I'll get inquiries that are like, how do I book? It's right there.
But also, I mean, this is a kind of outsourcing. You use a
Yes.
text service, right? Like that is a kind of outsourcing of answering those messages one to one. You have outsourced to a service.
Well, yeah, and I think that sometimes people don't think about it in that terms of like outsourcing means, in my mind, you didn't personally do it. Something or someone else did. So that outsource could be to an automated program. It could be to an automated, like it could be to a set of templates that you're now putting into your system that like that's outsourced like in a totally different kind of sense than like hiring someone to do that job over and over. I think that there's lots of different ways. It's more just like you have all these tasks. How are they getting done?
Yeah. Well, and some people hire VAs, virtual
Yeah.
assistants, to help. And there are some situations where the VA might be writing the same emails to your clients again and again. Now, you're not doing it, but are you paying them an hourly wage every month to help write the emails to your clients? Or would it be better to spend money upfront on a set of templates like we provide? And maybe you hire a VA to help you get it all into your system, but then it's done and you don't need someone every month to keep going with that work. So some of it outsourcing is thinking, are you paying a lump sum to have a problem fixed? And then the problem is fixed, or are you paying on a monthly basis to have someone take that problem away from you, but every month?
Yeah. Well, and I think I will also argue that like there's templates like ours that are like, here's your email set or your SMS set, your text messaging set that is done a certain way. Like, let's say you pay someone to do those things, or even like, let's think about it in terms of like graphic design. Like, there's like tonic templates, right? They're
Hmm.
beautiful, they're so well done. And if you hired one of those designers to do them all individually for you, it would cost you a small fortune because even the templates cost a small fortune, right? But once you have them, you can then hire somebody else to help you tweak them or, like make them your own. So like I have those tonic templates, but then I have a graphic designer that I use that is not very expensive, who I will give all my blog headings to, and she goes in and plugs them in and then posts them to Pinterest for me.
Yeah.
And so like that's a step that like I wrote the blog and I just gave her the images that I used and then the headlines. And then she took the template that I'd already purchased and made it happen. So, like with our templates, you might hire, a VA or a studio manager or somebody to like be working with your clients as you're starting to get more and more busy. You're working with more clients. You need more help in like the business admin side of your space. You take our templates and you say, hey, Jill, you're my new studio manager. I need you to set up these things that, you're going to shoot them off to these clients. You're going to personalize them with the baby's name and you're going to make them our own. And that person takes these professional templates that have been created and then makes them yours in that sense of like they're made for each individual client. Or that is not an actual person. That's not a Jill. That's an AI bot or a
Mhm.
CRM that's maybe not personalizing it, but sending it out at regular intervals that just gets it done for you. And there isn't that personal touch. And that's a level of how do you want to run your
Yeah.
business? But those templates could work for either situation,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
you know?
Well, and I often think about this where I say you wouldn't want me to write your blogs, but it's because when people pay me for the strategy that's involved, I will help write like the templates and I will write like individual templates for clients. I've done this before where I help create how it's going to look for that one client, but they then use a VA or copywriter who's just beginning and doesn't charge the rates that I charge to fill the templates in for them. And I'll maybe
Right.
help write their brand voice. Like, here's how you're going to write like this brand. I'll do that strategy, then hire a cheap writer off of Fiverr to like actually do the work for you. So yeah, it
Right.
doesn't have to be an all or nothing. Like, no one is going to hire me to write their emails, not photographers, that's for sure. They might hire me to write their website copy, but even then, maybe not. But they might hire somebody to do strategy and then have someone at a lower price implement. Or you might decide the number of hours it involves to do that implementation bit is worth you just doing it if you know it's a one-off thing that you have to do. So
Well, and if
all
it's
of this
something
is
that
the
falls
time we
into
want
one
it
of those
in.
gray zones for you or one of those areas that you really enjoy,
Yeah.
then now we're talking about something different entirely. But if it's in that zone of like accounting where you're like, I do not want to do this at all, then you're
Yeah,
gonna
it's
feel, I
easy.
think you're gonna like be more excited about spending the money on that thing when it's something that you really didn't want to do.
Right.
Like I never get mad about my bookkeeping fees because I just think about like the very first year, I was a little bit annoyed because it was more money than I thought it was going to be when I first got it set up. And I was like, oh, why am I paying? I could just do this myself. And then I got to what is it? You have to file by March, right? So it's like early March every year, I would be like, oh crap, I need to go through everything. And I would have to dig through all my receipts and pull everything up and figure out my mileage and all these things. And it would take me a solid week of just pissed at myself for not having been better organized throughout the year before, getting it done so that I could drop it off at the CPAs to like actually have my taxes done. And then the very first year that I had the bookkeeper, they had linked to my CPA. And so he could like just log in to my QuickBooks.
It's
And
brilliant.
he had like, I think he had like 3 or 4 questions for me. But otherwise, like I did nothing. And I was like, oh. Oh my God, that was the best money I've ever
And that
spent.
entire week of you being annoyed.
Oh, I was so like tickled with myself, like, oh, look what I
I
did.
saved
My
that.
husband was like, why didn't you do this sooner?
Yeah,
It's like, I don't know. I have
this
no idea,
clearly was worth it.
but I am thrilled.
So let's talk about another one because I'm interested to know where this sits in your zone of interest and genius
Yes.
is sales calls and hiring someone to do your sales
Sales
calls.
help. I just hired somebody new for that. Um, I love having someone do that for me. Um, Mostly because, I mean, I think it depends on how your business is structured. Because some photographers, especially like all-inclusive photographers, are not going to need that sales call the same way. It's going to be more of a like, maybe you need to get on the phone with them to figure out where you're meeting or figure out what everybody's wearing or make a plan, whatever. But like, it's not necessarily to sell them on your services. Whereas,
Mhm.
like, when you're a studio like mine, that like, I need people to understand what we do differently and why it's valuable and why you want to spend more money. Because comparatively, like there's newborn photographers in Boise that charge $200-300 and give them all the files. So when I'm talking to somebody on the phone and having to tell them like you're going to probably spend between $2,000 and $3,000, and they need to understand why. They
Yeah.
need that value discussion. And I think I've talked about this before, but like I have discovered, and this is again like discovering things about your business and yourself as you get further along. But like I have discovered that I have a very fragile artist heart. And I don't do very well when I have these conversations, especially if like there's a few back to back that somebody is like just doesn't understand what I do or value what I do. And then they are really negative or like tell me no. I get very like down on myself and my work, and like it's just not good for my heart. And so like as much as like I've taken classes, I've learned a lot about doing those sales calls, and I am 1,000% more comfortable doing them now than I ever was at the beginning. But I still like knowing those things about myself. I really try to limit the amount that I take to protect my heart, but also because I think that it's just easier for everyone when they're not talking to the heart of the business. Like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, I think it's easier for somebody to say no to my new sales lady, Lisa, and say, hey, it doesn't sound like it's the right
Mhm.
fit, than somebody talking directly to the artist and saying,
And then
you're not worth it.
if they feel bad, what that means is they hedge and they're like, oh, maybe I'll think about it a bit longer. But
Yeah.
that's not serving you and it's not serving them if it's always going to be a no. They're just trying to figure out how to
Well, and
say no.
you know, when people are doing that, you can tell the difference. You can
Right.
feel it. If,
But you kind of have to keep the conversation going because they haven't actually said no yet. So you've got to keep going, and there's more follow-up phone calls and emails, and it's all just leading to the one place it was going to lead to anyway. So it's kind of
yeah,
interesting because I love doing sales calls and I would hate, and it's a different situation in the kind of business that I'm in, I guess, also because generally I'm talking to other business owners. It's a B2B kind of area, but I would never want to outsource that part
yeah,
because I really enjoy that part of it. And so that's the bit where this is not like there's one list we're going to give you and say outsource these 7 things
yeah,
eventually
it's
over
so
time because
individual.
every business owner has a different idea about it. But did you have a sense because obviously not everybody's going to need to like contract out for sales, but also maybe some people are like, well, I couldn't afford that yet. Like, at what point did you start to feel like, gosh, I really need to get a handle on this? Was it just the kind of hurt feeling sense, or was there a time management point where you realized it was too
I
much?
mean, a little bit of both. Like early on, it was the hurt feelings sort of side of it. And then when I do big like marketing campaigns, so we'll do Facebook ads for our book projects, and then we'll do them for our Chunky Baby contest in the February time zone. And then we do like a couple like things like that throughout the year. Like I've done like model calls and whatnot. And so we'll have like an influx of leads during those time. And so this last summer we had we were trying to hire a new associate photographer to do newborns, and so I was running this model call to try and get more models in so that I could train this new photographer. And so we had all these people because everybody thinks it's all for free and they want everything, and so there's a lot of, we need to discuss this on the phone because you need to fully understand what we're doing here so that everybody's happy. And like, if you go back and watch our one of these where we talked about model calls, like that's such an important part of a successful model call is people understanding.
Hmm.
And so there were tons and tons of phone calls. And I really discovered that, like, so I have studio manager Jen, and Jen is wonderful and she's great at her job, but she does not like the sales call part either.
Hmm.
And so it was difficult for her to have that like really heavy call volume where she's trying to talk to, sometimes like six people a day. And like that doesn't sound like a lot, but it is when you're like
Hmm.
on a phone call for like 30 minutes just talking. I don't know. It just is it's a lot. Like more than like three for me is like I can't. Like
Too
two or
much. Yeah.
three is plenty. And so one thing that I wanted to say here is like I think that so we discovered that we needed somebody because of that. But then also like if you're thinking, well, I don't have that many calls, like I can't hire somebody, I can't guarantee someone hours. I used to believe that if I couldn't offer someone a 40-hour a week job, that like no one was going to want to work with me and like I couldn't hire somebody for that. But that's just not true. And one thing that I discovered this summer as I was trying to hire this call person and then a new graphic designer, I was using, oh gosh, what's it called?
The Mom
Hire
Project.
hire my mom? Oh, Mom Project. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so Mom Project, you can list your job for free and say, this is what I'm looking for. And all these people will apply to your job. I had so many graphic designers apply to my job. It's incredible. And actually overwhelming, incredible. But like, um, but I discovered that like it was okay that I was saying, hey, I maybe have 5 hours a week.
Hmm.
Like there were still plenty of people that applied for that job and said, yeah, I still want it. And
Well, and
so,
I mean, if you think about what I do, I work on retainer for a lot of different clients. The lowest one I have is 2 hours a month.
yeah,
2 hours a month.
yes,
Now, for my business, that works because I do multiple clients like that, and that fills up full-time days for me, or not full-time, but full-time based on my hours days.
yeah,
But there are some people who are quite happy to just do 5 hours a week, say, of top up.
yeah,
And I think that sense that your studio, like instead of having someone who it isn't their specialty bundle everything together and say, could you do these three things for me? Just contract out the bits that you want done just for a few hours at a time and see if that's
yeah.
working before you add
Well,
somebody else.
just like you're trying to sit here and analyze like what your zone of genius is, when you hire people, you need to figure out what their zone of genius is. And it's not necessarily the same. Like my first studio manager was not very good at client communication stuff. Like she dropped the ball on a lot of those email workflows, which is a lot of like how you and I got involved because I was like,
Hmm.
what do I do? How do I fix this? And it was because like my studio manager wasn't very good at that. And so I needed to find ways to streamline my workflow so that one, she knew what came next. Like, what was the client supposed to get next, but also that it was like bullet like Jill and I have had this conversation multiple times
Hmm.
because my old studio manager was very, very bubbly, warm, friendly, lots of exclamation points, sort of
Hmm.
writer. And I kept being like, but this is not me. Why does it feel so
Ads.
wrong? And Jill was like, because that's not your brand voice. That's not how you sound. And so when you write one email and then your studio manager writes another one, it's not consistent. And so then your clients are confused because it's not a like,
Because they get super bubbly Paige one day, and then the next day when they get
yeah,
professional Paige, they're like, "Oh, did we do something to piss her off? Like,
right.
why did
Yes,
this
yes,
change?" But in fact,
yes.
you didn't. It's just
No,
that the
Paige is just
regular
always
Paige
a little bit.
doesn't talk like this, so that's
Yeah.
why it didn't sound like that.
No, but what I was going to say is like, so that was how I got into the email workflow. But I was talking the other day to someone like my new studio manager is very good at the client
Hmm.
communication part of it. And that's like her zone of genius is keeping that stuff organized. But what she's not very good at is keeping like the physical client
Hmm.
closet organized. And my old studio manager was great at that. And so there's little things that you figure out, like what are people really good at? And that's what they should be doing for you. And so if you discover that somebody is doing your social media for you and they're super slow and it's costing you a fortune because it takes them 10 hours to do a reel, that's not the right person for that job. So let them do, like, and then you discover like actually they're really good at Canva and they're so fast at putting together marketing things or guides or whatever. Like hire them for that,
Yeah.
like
Well, and
figure out what,
the more things that you lump together into a job description, the less likely someone is going to be the unicorn that can do them all. So if you think about this again from the other person's point of view, they see a job advert and it says, "I'd love you to be a social studio manager. You'll be greeting the clients and sending emails and doing sales calls." And they're like, "Oh, I love to hold babies. I guess I can do the other bit." Like they
yeah.
apply for the job because there's a part in it that interests them, but they might not like all the parts. But if you've
Well,
separated that out into sections, get the person who
I
likes to hold
also
the baby to
think
be the baby holder.
that here's the other thing that I will say is that like there's a lot of people that come into my studio, like moms or grandmas or whoever is in here, and they'll be like, "Oh, you must just love your job. Like you have the best job." Because they see it as you're holding babies all day long.
Mhm.
And it's just, oh, isn't it just so lovely? Baby people feel that way. Not everybody feels that way,
Yeah,
but
but
baby
I would
people
not.
look at it and go, "Oh my God, you just must have the best job. You just get to hold
Mhm.
babies all day long." And you're like, well, yeah, but. And so with that, I think a lot of times, like I used to, I don't do this anymore, but I used to put out a thing on Instagram when I needed help with something. I'd be like, hey, I'm hiring for this particular job. Do you know anybody? I'm like, we'll try and reach out that way. And I discovered what happens when you do that is you get a bunch of your friends that are family or looky-loos on your Instagram account that feel that way of like, oh, that would be so fun. I'm gonna hold babies and they don't realize that it's a business.
Mhm.
And so then you get these people that like think that they can just help and like, yeah, it'll be so great. And then if you're anything like me, you feel bad because it's your friend and you're like, maybe I should hire her, even though I know she's not the right fit and we're gonna have issues. And like, just because somebody said that they could help you and do that job for you is not the best way to outsource. Like,
Doesn't
it
mean
is
they actually
much
can.
better.
Yeah.
It is much better to find somebody that is a stranger to you, that if it's not working out, you can say, you know what? It's not working out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't
Move.
have to see them at someone's barbecue the next week.
Yes. Yes. It gets really, really awkward and uncomfortable, even if you didn't hire them to
Mhm.
just be like, because sometimes it comes down to like they want more money than you're willing to
Mhm.
offer,
Or more
or
hours.
you just know that you're not like it's not going to work out personality wise, or they're just not the right fit. Like what, for whatever reason, this is not a good idea. Like, don't just hire the person that's the most convenient and that's right there
Mhm.
saying, yeah, I want that job,
Well,
because
and
that's not going to work out well,
I think
usually.
this also starts to split into what is we're like there's very few jobs nowadays in a business that you need a physically located person for. So in your business there is a little bit. Studio manager has to be someone who can come to your studio. But
Yeah.
lots of the other examples we gave of how to outsource, copywriters, social media managers, VAs, accountants and bookkeepers, graphic designers, those can all be done online, which means you
Yeah.
don't need someone in your geographical location, which means you can search by, are you good at this job? And then,
Yeah.
like, second is how you get on with them or
Well,
how you
my
feel
new
about
call
it.
person's in Minnesota or in Massachusetts. So she is not anywhere near local to me and probably will never step foot in my studio.
Yeah, but
And
it
the
doesn't
lady
need
that
to.
does my Pinterest is in Ohio, I think, or Indiana. She's in the Midwest somewhere. And like, I mean, I think my graphic designer's in California. So there's people all over the place that can do these jobs for you. And like, even on like Fiverr, you can find people in other countries that will do it even cheaper if you can find the right people. And it's just kind of a matter of figuring out what those things are. But I think first and foremost, you have to figure out what's going to move the needle the most for you, or make the most, like, either make your job more comfortable for you in the terms of like bookkeeping. Like bookkeeping doesn't save me money, except for maybe that it saves me money in that like it makes me very aware of my expenses.
Well, yes, that,
So
and we're back to how many cute wraps and
yeah.
dresses you got.
Yeah. So I would say that in some a roundabout way, it saves me money because I am more aware of my profitability and
Mhm.
what's really happening in my business money wise. And so these are all
That's
good
great.
things, right? But it doesn't necessarily like actually bring more money in. Whereas like a marketing effort might actually bring in more clients and actually like physically put more money into my account because of
Mhm.
something I did. Or like, blogs and social media are kind of a difficult category to say like, well, yes, because I wrote this blog, I got 3 new clients, like that's kind of hard to track. But generally, like that sort of marketing
Well, and
out.
even you said that you would never outsource editing, but for those people where editing doesn't feel good, that probably saves you money in the sense, it's kind of a roundabout way, but in a sense it can potentially take more clients on in a month.
Yes, absolutely. I
Editing's
think a
being
lot of
done.
people do that because I mean, the editing part can take usually considerably longer than the actual session does. So if you can hire somebody to do your editing for you that would have taken you 3 hours, and in that time you can take 2 more clients, like, obviously you're going to make the most money by pushing the shutter if you're the artist. But then, other people like are like, I know photographers that like started as a photographer and became the studio like owner and actually don't click the shutter anymore
Mhm.
because they're really good at the marketing and the business and like getting people in the door. And like, yeah, they love the photography side of it. And like, I know a lot of them like still dabble, but they don't necessarily like that's not necessarily their role anymore. And
Mhm.
so if you're the like, no, I'm an artist and I'm always going to be the photographer, the photography side of it is always going to be the most important part, then that's never going to be your future.
Mhm.
And like, if you're the other way around, where you're like, no, I want to have a really successful business that brings in $1 million a year, well, you're going to need to hire more photographers. You
Mhm.
just don't have enough time to be able to do all those sessions yourself unless you're charging 10 grand a shoot, and most people aren't. So,
And that's where you start to think about like, are you doing a studio or an agency model? So I know that you have like dabbled now and again with having associate photographers. When I think
yeah.
about this in my business, the next natural stage for copywriters is to go to an agency model where you hire junior writers that help you. And I know that I would not want to do that. And I've thought about it and decided it caps how far my business can go because I can't take on more projects than I can do myself. But I thought that through, and that's the decision that I want because the stress and the effort of having junior writers and being responsible for their output and not knowing what that output is going to be is does not feel worth it for me. So all of this is that again coming back to the balance of like what do you want out of your business and what do you want out of your life?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that that you have to figure out what that bigger dream is. I just I think I told you about this, but I will tell everybody else about this. I had this lady in, not lady, girl. She's a girl.
You
Young
did tell
woman,
me.
let's say. Young woman came in. She was very, very nice. She asked to pick my brain, came over to the studio, and I was like, hey, like, what do you want to do with your life? How do you see yourself in 5 years? And she's like, I don't know. I was like, okay, like, what do you want to shoot? And I kind of got out of her that she likes shooting families and she likes younger children and she likes babies. Like, okay. And but like when you started to try and get her to talk about like, do you want a studio? Do you want to just shoot outdoors? Like, do you want like this big like company, or do you just really want to be like a photographer that takes pictures for people? Like, there's nothing wrong with any of those options, but you have to
Mhm.
know like kind of what you want. Like, at least what do you want right now? Like,
Yeah.
and then like have some semblance of like, what are we working towards? Like, I mean, at the beginning of 2023, I really felt like I wanted to shoot between 10 and 15 newborns a month. And I was like, I'm going to be so happy if I can just like outsource a bunch of stuff, have enough leads coming in that I'm shooting 10 to 15 newborns a month consistently and just like working all the time. And it would be great. And then like I think I got it to between 8 and 10. I don't think I ever got to 15 consistently, but I had 8 to 10 for most of 2023. And I made really good money last year, and I was absolutely miserable. I was so busy. I never saw my family. I was constantly up late and up early, or it was just I was at the worst place I think I've ever been but like monetarily, you would have been like, she's killing it. She's doing so, her studio is thriving right now. But I was dying a little bit because it just was not what I needed and
Hmm.
ultimately wanted. So I say that because sometimes what we think we want is not actually what we want, or we realize that it's not what we want when we get it. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with discovering those things and
Hmm.
changing your mind as you go,
Definitely.
because I made some big pivots this year. And if you look at my numbers, you might be like, oh my God, what happened? But like, I feel so much better
Yeah.
in all aspects of my life that like this is the right level for Paige and her family and her business. And like last year looks better on paper, but
Hmm.
actually was much
Not a
worse.
better
So,
year in practice. And I think that's
yeah,
where to kind of tie this back to the outsourcing, yeah, like our generally our journeys always move. It's never just like one straight line. If someone had a
yeah,
straight line journey, I'd love to hear it. But I'm assuming that everybody shifts, just like you said, like you go along for a little bit and you realize, oh, this kind of is not what I thought it was going to be, and I have to
yeah.
change, or
Well,
circumstances
like,
change in
and
your life.
so what I was going to say is that so last year when I was doing so much more, I was outsourcing a lot more than I am
Hmm.
this year because I needed to, because I
Yeah.
was working so much more that I did end up outsourcing some of my editing and didn't like that. So that
Hmm.
was not a good choice for me. And I have since pulled it back and am all only doing it myself now. But like I think that it's okay to try those things and then pull them back if you need to
Because
and figure out
it
what that
taught
right level
you,
is.
like it let you see that that was a line that you had guessed you were not going
Yeah.
to be comfortable with, and then, oh, I was right. Like, really, that is too far for me. But
Yeah.
maybe you would have done that and discovered that actually that freed some things up, and you're like, gosh, I wish I'd done that ages ago, just like the bookkeeper. So
Yeah.
sometimes you don't know till you try, but kind of the outsourcing part does connect to how much growth you're hoping for in your year. So, like, are you struggling right now when you look back at the last year? The Paige at the end of 2023 probably had a lot more outsourcing plans than the Paige at the end of 2024 does. So how
Right.
much you're going to outsource connects to sort of like where you are in your business right now, and then also where you would like to be going. So if you're like, no, I really want to be building up the business, then start putting in place ideas of outsourcing small, but in the way that you can grow it over the year.
Well, yeah, and you have to figure out what those things are preemptively
Yes.
sometimes because in like so for me, my big goals for 2025 are more moving into the educational space and doing more work like this where we get to talk to newborn photographers and help them grow and with my editing course and like helping people that want to get better at these things. And in order to do that, I need to outsource things from my in-person work so that I have time for those things.
Right.
And so looking at your goals and figuring out, okay, where am I going to need some extra time so that I can accomplish these things that I want to do, whether that's shooting more or spending more time with your family or whatever it is, you need to figure out what that balance is and where you're going to get those hours from. So unfortunately, we only have so much time. I wish that there was like a pause button so we could like Jill and I could get so much stuff done if we could just pause things for a couple
Well, I'm
weeks.
also going to say
But
that the end of 2023 Paige truly understood that there's only so much time because you squeezed those, like, can I get some more time out of the year? But
yeah,
eventually you get burnt out of that. Like, that's like you can do that in small seasons and weeks and in like fall,
yeah.
but there's only so long in a year that you can squeeze each end of the day and the time that you have available.
Yeah, I think that if you have those bigger goals that you want to move one part of your business along, you want more clients or you want less clients or whatever it happens to be, or you want to, work on some project entirely different outside of it, then you need to figure out how do I make that happen?
Yeah.
So go read that Who Not How book and figure out where your gray zones are and then make lists of what those big things are that you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Who can do this for me? And then
Mhm.
go find those people that can do those things for you at a reasonable rate. And like we talked about, like maybe it's 10 different people that
Mhm.
do 10 different tasks and they just do these small little like micro parts of your business for you, but they do those parts really, really, really well,
Mhm.
rather than hiring one person that's just like a jack of all trades that doesn't really do anything very well, but kind of gets it done for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Or maybe you start with just 2 hours a week of social media help. You would
Yep.
love more, and you get there over the year. But when you start, you can only hire someone for 2 hours a week, and that's okay to begin with, as you're building it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also the option to get like interns too. I
Yes.
wanted to mention that because there are a lot of people out there that really do want to learn from you and want to be involved with a photography business. Even if you're feeling like, well, how could I teach somebody else? I'm like just getting started myself. Like there are people that are always behind you, like that are one step, like you're one step ahead of them. And so if you have one step ahead of someone, they can come help you, they can come watch, they
And
can come
learn that
take
step.
behind the scenes for you while you're shooting, that can then go onto your social media. You can do, like they can work on your, like putting everything into your new CRM that you bought on Black Friday sale, like what like
Yeah.
there's all kinds of people that can learn from working within your business for nothing, like a full intern or just like really minimally. I actually had my 12-year-old wanted to make some extra money the other day, and so I put him to work doing some like data entry sort of stuff for
Mhm.
my business. And
My
like,
12-year-old does these YouTube videos for
yeah,
us.
there you go. Yeah. So there's lots of options there that can get you like outsourcing and creatively too, that doesn't
Yeah.
cost as much money.
Well, and again, that sense of what you're good at and what other people are good at. When you and I started talking about like what we were going to discuss each month, marketing comes really easy to both of us. So we don't really think of marketing as a hard thing to do. But as we started to ask photographers and try and figure out what you needed, like it became obvious to us that lots of you don't understand what funnels are and lead magnets and how you advertise your social media and how you keep your client expectations high and get referrals and those things which don't feel hard at all to us and we could talk about all day long just ourselves. We discover that actually it's valuable to talk about with other people. So you may only be at step one in your business, but there might be a thing you do really well as one part of your business that an intern might come along and want to learn from you on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that there's so many areas, like so many hats that
Mm-hmm.
somebody could pick up and wear for you, that let them. If somebody
So
wants to learn or help out or
yeah. So I was going to say, we get back to the 17 hats. I feel like that's a nice circle back to the beginning of the
yeah.
conversation. So probably a good place to leave it.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, go dog go. Go find the hats you don't like.
go and throw some hats out before the year starts.
Yeah. Purge the closet of all the ugly hats.
Excellent. Well, we hope you all had a great 2024 and we hope that you've been learning some things from us by watching these videos and we look forward to seeing you in 2025.
Yeah, that's weird to say.
I
All
know.
right. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Bye.
All right.